The UN fears up to 800,000 civilians are still trapped in the ISIL-held part of Mosul, where the anti-terror operation is now raging. A similar situation was seen in neighbouring Syria a couple of months ago. Back then, though, the UN raised concerns over the fate of 100,000 people in Eastern Aleppo as Syrian forces tried to retake it from Al-Nusra terrorists. RT's Ilya Petrenko compares the battles for the two cities.
The battle to retake Mosul, the battle to retake Aleppo, wiping out Islamic State here and kicking out the Nusra Front, affiliated rebels here. U.S.-led coalition airstrikes here, Russian-led airstrikes here. Masses of fleeing and suffering civilians from both cities. Neighbors on the map that would surely get the same kind of treatment in newsrooms. You wish the Mosul story.
Flags are now flying over more buildings in Mosul.
Now, the Iraqi military is within firing range of the main government buildings in western Mosul.
Praising coalition advances. A bit of news from Aleppo for a contrast.
The last push for pro-government forces. They know the goal is within sight.
Blockaded and besieged by the Assad regime.
Today, fresh allegations of war crimes against the regime.
The people in Syria believe very strongly that the U.S., by not acting, is implicit, or complicit rather, in these crimes by Russia and by the regime of Bashar al-Assad.
30,000 people have so far fled the fighting in western Mosul in Iraq.
Entire neighbourhoods on the move. They may face an uncertain future, but at least now they're safe.
But ask these ladies and they would tell you that settling in is not easy.
Reporting on refugee hardship, but compare the tone to Aleppo.
A horrific humanitarian tragedy.
The people of Aleppo are starving.
Civilians waiting in freezing temperatures with almost no food.
A humanitarian catastrophe unfolds.
TV coverage aside, how justifiable was each refugee exodus for those in Washington?
And I've seen, reports that they're allowed to leave. They shouldn't have to leave. And they shouldn't be being bombed by their own government and by the Russian military.
Well, again, it's not a question of whether we think they should or shouldn't.
Ilya Petrenko reporting there. But we also asked analysts for their take on the media coverage of these two key battles.
In both cases, the governments in Syria and in Iraq are trying to retake parts of the city from terrorists. In Mosul, it's ISIS. In Aleppo, it was primarily the Al-Qaeda branch in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra. But in both cases, in the case of Aleppo, the Western media referred to it as Aleppo falling, whereas in Mosul, they do call it Aleppo being liberated. Well, it's because of the inherent bias of the media. And the Western media, unfortunately, has entirely left Aleppo, where the situation is dramatically improving now that the terrorists have been defeated there.
Collateral damage is a nice way of saying nice people being killed. No, because that would go against the surgical strike narrative. That would go against the story of how the good guys are successful and how ISIS, that these bombs only kill ISIS or ISIL or Daesh, that they only kill the bad guys. Anything that happens in Syria, anything, it's not going to be portrayed. It's not going to be looked at as favorably or as optimistically or as carefully as if it happens in Iraq. When you have misinformation, again, a minute, sometimes less than that, you've got this little window of opportunity. Nobody knows, nobody cares, nobody's demanding for truth. You're going to have this misinformation and this false information.